Hi, I'm Cal. I'm filling in for Sarah Nolan today.
Hi, so this is Charlotte, Luke, and Sarah, and we are doing East of Eden Rhetorical Analysis Video Project, Group 1, Part 1, Chapter 1, Section 1. And so the Salinas Valley is in Northern California, is a long, narrow swale between two ranges of mountains. And the Salinas River winds and twists up the center until it falls at last into Monterey Bay. So here we're talking about setting, and we know this is ethos because Steinbeck lived in the Salinas Valley, so he's very credible on the subject. And moving on to the next paragraph. I remember my childhood names for grasses and secret flowers. I remember where a toad may live and what time the birds awaken in the summer. This right here is repetition, and it's a real good example of imagery. And what trees, continuing on, and what trees and seasons smelled like, how people looked and walked and smelled even. The memory of odors is very rich. I remember that the Gabilan Mountains to the east of the valley were light, gay mountains full of sun, loveliness, and kind of invitation. So you wanted to climb into their warm foothills almost as you wanted to climb into the flat of a beloved mother. This is pathos because it's almost like home, and that's what Steinbeck's trying to portray. They're beckoning mountains with a brown grass love. The Santa Lucias Mountains stood up against the sky to the west and kept the valley from the open sea. And right here it's personification because the grass can't beckon. This is also an oxymoron because the brown grass is beckoning, and green grass is beckoning as opposed to ground grass being beckoning. Santa Lucias stood up against the sky to the west and kept the valley from the open sea, and they were dark and brooding, unfriendly and dangerous. Alright. I always found myself in a dread of west and a love of east. Wherever I got such an idea I cannot say, unless it could be that the morning came over the peaks of the Gabilan Mountains, and the night drifted back from the ridges of the Santa Lucias. It may be the birth and death of the day had some part in my feeling about the two ranges of mountains. So this right here is also a personification where it discusses the birth and death of the day, and it discusses a cycle which goes on in the Santa Lucias Valley Mountains. From both sides of the valley, little streams slipped out of the hill canyons and fell onto the bed of the Salinas River. This right here is imagery that Steinbeck is providing. In the winter of wet years, the streams ran full freshet, and they swelled the river until sometimes it ragged and boiled, bank full, and then it was a destroyer. The river tore the edges of the farmlands and washed whole acres down. It toppled barns and houses into itself, to go floating and bobbing away. It trapped cows and pigs and sheep, and drowned them in its mud. The river tore the edges of the farmlands and washed whole acres down. It toppled barns and houses into itself, to go floating and bobbing away. It trapped cows, pigs, and sheep, and drowned them in its muddy brown water, and carried them to the sea. This is process analysis because it describes the entire process simply of what is going on and the destruction of the river. Then when the late spring came, the river drew in from its edges, and the sand banks appeared. And in this summer the river didn't run at all above ground. Some pools would be left in the deep swirl places under a high river bank. The tules and grasses grew back, and willows straightened up with the flood debris in their upper branches. The Salinas was only a part-time river. The summer sun drove it underground. This was not a fine river at all, but it was the only one we had, so we boasted about it. How dangerous it was in a wet winter, and how dry it was in a dry summer. This year's comparison with the wet river and the dry summer. Also, the destruction of the river and the renewal of the river and the land around it is a religious illusion of like the Great Flood.